Hizutome is a disgusting little nerd with a peculiar interest. He enjoys playing trashy role-playing games. In his most recent one, we see him defeat the Dark Lord, which looks like Godzilla. We then see that Hizutome has a weird taste for using a mask. An elf girl is just behind him, happy that Hizutome, the hero, managed to defeat the Dark Lord and peace will now prosper. She talks about the journey both had to take to reach this moment. Hizutome agrees with her and mentions he's been waiting for this moment. The elf looks at him, showing some romantic interest. But your boy jumps and dropkicks her in the face, telling her that she will meet the Demon Lord. In fact, he beats the character up, explaining that she's the real Dark Lord and a menace to the world. A final window appears, explaining the game ended. He gets hyped up, explaining he was waiting for the whole game to dropkick her. We then find out that in this world, virtual reality is a thing, so traditional games are now considered retro. However, as usual, most of the games are true trash and nobody plays them, except if you're Hizutome, who likes to clear trash games and put them into categories. This type of person is simply called a freak. Hizutome feels so relieved that he managed to clear the game that he decides to touch some grass. Inside another game, of course, because he's known as the Trash Game Hunter. But first, he needs to prepare himself and head out to school. He's your typical loner guy in high school, walking slowly and stuff. But he has a stalker. It's a girl who seems to be interested in him, waiting for him to pass by. She tries to prepare the whole conversation, making a scene in front of everyone. After a whole awkward moment of training, Hizutome walks by her. She takes a deep breath before reaching out and trying to strike up a conversation. But another nerd appears and starts talking to our boy. They start talking about games, and the girl feels disappointed. The girl is named Rei. She's a pretty shy girl. She then decides to continue stalking Hizutome and goes to the game shop, where she meets Mara. Rei looks around, but Mara tells her that he's not there. Rei tries to dismiss it, explaining she's here to check some games out. But Mara knows she's not interested in games. Mara calls her a lucky girl because she's young and in love. She then explains to Rei that Hizutome is now interested in an extra special trash game, and that's why he isn't there. Rei is confused, but Mara shows her the last game he just played. Mara explains he could take him more than usual to finish it up, and Rei reveals that her sister played it and said it was really hard. Mara simply calls it a legendary trash game, mostly because of the trashy elf companion he gets, hard to predict boss attack patterns. And the game has more bugs than you have air in your pockets. Mara reveals the rumors that people need extreme skills to beat the first boss. But in the end, most people simply quit the game in the first real battle. Mara then starts laughing it out, mentioning she heard that they can only beat the final boss if they're wearing a mask and board shorts. Mara then asks if Rei is making some progress. Rei says she is, but when she tries to explain it, Hizutome enters the shop. He asks if there's any decent game, and Mara greets him. She then looked in front, and Rei disappeared. She then asks if he already finished beating the game, and he reveals his cocky side. He brags about beating the game and calls the game a spectacular pile of garbage. He then badmouths the elf girl, explaining she ticked him off until the end. He reveals she's the reason he encountered problems during the questline, and she then makes the situation even worse. She literally is the reason why everyone around her got clapped. She literally clapped the NPCs for absolute no reason, making him suffer the consequences. She then finds a way to blame what she has done on the last boss. However, she was always the real problem. She was always creating problems for him and he couldn't complain, because she would go mad and wouldn't go anywhere with him. She refuses to move the story along, and the autosave locks him into a state where he has to get her into a good mood, which takes hours just to continue. He continues the rant about the game, and Mara explains she's impressed he didn't quit it. But Hizutome explains that he could get revenge. He reveals that after defeating the boss, he has 3 minutes to do anything he wants before the credits start rolling. So, he simply decided to beat the elf up without consequences. Basically, the game was created to defeat the Dark Lord, and then beat your annoying companion. He explains the whole game was created to frustrate the player until he gets those 3 minutes to release the frustration. And when that moment arrives, they enjoy the full extensions. He then cites and reveals that it will be hard to find a game worse than that one. Mara notices that Rei is hearing the conversation from afar and decides to wing girl her. She asks Hizutome if he is interested in trying a game that isn't considered trash. He's initially confused, but Mara points to the poster behind her. It's the game Shangri-La Frontier, which will be adding more servers during this new summer break. She explains that he already experienced the trash games, so he should learn how to appreciate the good ones. She explains the game has over 30 million players, which impresses him. It's a MMO, instead of the typical solo games he plays. Mara explains he could have fun on this game because it was designed for most people to enjoy. She then looks at Ray and winks. Izutome is still looking at the poster, thinking this is the opposite of a trash game. He then calls it a god-tier game. He decides to get the game and returns home. He looks on the internet for some info about the game. He finds out he was released a few months ago and broke a world record for simultaneous player logins. He reads the lore of the game and reads its reviews. The game still has some haters, but they're overshadowed by the tens of thousands of positive reviews. He decides to install it on his PC and puts his VR headset on. Before starting, he wonders how long has he played a game that isn't considered trash. But before he answers the question, he logs onto the game. He starts creating his character and feels impressed with the number of classes the players can be. He then decides to become a mercenary with twin swords because it sounds flexible. He then must choose his origin. He can be a sword master, wanderer, or an obvious talent. Each of them has some specific bonus stats. He picks wanderer because he gets a luck bonus, which affects his critical chance and item drop rate. He then starts to build his physical appearance and becomes hyped up with all the options. He's been so limited in his old trash games that he's being blown away with this minor stuff. And for that reason, he decides to go hardcore on designing his character for the first time in his life, something that I always do in MMOs. In the end, he picks up a muscular, almost naked guy with a bird face. I have no idea why he thought this was cool, but turns out that it's all because of his game style. He only has one strategy in games: have no armor and they get best weapon available. But weapons are always expensive, but in this game, he can sell his starter equipment during character creation and make a profit. He only has a bird face because it's a mask. He wanted to hide his face because it's weird to see a random naked guy, and nobody would see it strange to see a naked bird guy around. He then picks up his name, Sunraku, which is the same he always uses. After everything is ready, Izutome lays down in bed and prepares to begin. Like me, he skips the prologue and starts in a forest. He looks around, initially confused, and starts checking his body. He feels impressed that moving his character feels like moving his body in real life. He starts running and climbs a tree. The last game he played was so awkward to move around, but this is a god-tier game, so he feels like an insult to compare the two. He then starts to explore, noticing how huge the game is. He opens up his map to find out his location, but he's a bit confused. He thought popular games like these usually start in a tutorial town for beginners. That is true, but since he chose to be a wanderer, the starts at a random point in the beginner's area. He thinks the map looks quite basic and decides to head to the first town to check things out. He jumps from the tree and is impressed by how amazing the landing feels like. While heading to the down, he checks his stats. He only has 30 health points, and his vitality is 3 because he doesn't have any equipment on. So, he thinks that he will rely on high luck to reach the city safely. A few seconds later, a goblin jumps from a tree and tries to cut him. Izutome manages to dodge the attack and is confused about how he will have to fight as soon as he starts to play it. He then summons his weapons and decides to test the combat engine in this game. The goblin rushes forward and attacks. Izutome manages to dodge by inches and slices it in half. He manages to defeat it with one hit and levels up to 2. He checks the goblin's axe, which is his drop item, and notices it can be used as dual-wielded weapon. However, the durability is already down to half. Suddenly, he hears something in the bushes. He prepares himself to fight, realizing there's so much to learn about this game. He needs to know monster weaknesses, patterns, and item drops. He feels excited to be joining this game, but he can't lose focus. Suddenly, a Vorpal bunny jumps from the bush and tries to pierce him with a knife. Izutome manages to dodge it, and the rabbit hits a tree. The tree is destroyed. Izutome realizes that if he gets hit once, he will die. The monster dashes forward again to attack him, but Izutome manages to block and then land a critical hit. However, that's not enough to defeat the monster. The bunny dashes forward once again, but Izutome manages to block again and lands a hit on the neck. Not only did he defeat the bunny, but he also levels up to 4. However, he didn't get any drops, especially the weapon that he wanted. A new window appears, revealing he just learned the flash counter skill. He realizes that in this game, he can learn skills by taking certain actions. This new skill adds bonus damage to counters after parrying the enemy attacks. He quickly understands that in this game, if he is skilled enough, he can fight higher level enemies. This makes him consider trying different fighting styles. However, he noticed something. He has yet to find any bugs in this game. He gets super hyped up and stretches out his body before heading out to look for more bunnies, just because he wants their weapon. On his way, he manages to get more axes from goblins and learns the spin/slash skill. He uses it to defeat an orc, but he feels like a clumsy skill that leaves him open to attacks. He just leveled up to 12 and decided to allocate his stat points. He puts 5 points into stamina and the rest into luck. However, he rarely managed to encounter the bunnies because of their low spawn rate, so he thinks they're rare monsters. It took him almost 2.5 hours just to find 50 bunnies and get a matching set of those knives. So, he thinks the drop rate is about 5%. He checks the knives and finds out they have bonus critical damage. He learned 2 more skills, but only Screw Pierce seems useful. Yet, there's a problem. He won't be able to level up anymore here because of the monster's low level. He opens up the map and realizes that he walked away from the initial city and is near the second one. So, he decides to cross the bridge and head there. When he gets to the bridge, he realizes there's a guardian monster to stop him. He must defeat it to cross the bridge. This is the Ravenous Python, a level 10 area boss. This is a monster that needs at least a 3-people party. However, Hizutome will solo it. He uses his gaming expiring to deduce a snake monster's attacks. He summons his weapons and rushes forward, asking the snake to give him something to enjoy. Meanwhile, in the starting town, we see a huge armored knight standing on the exit. I'm pretty sure this is Ray, waiting for Hizutome to log in. This is all for this anime. Give the video a like, and I will see you in the next minutes.